Hello, it's Jackie Barry here, author of Unboring, the book about online engagement coming soon, and experiential speaking, icebreakers and energizers for when everybody's in the same place at the same time. I'm here today with Justin Collinge, and we're going to talk about e-learning. He is the Director of Leadability, and he's transforming people development, creating opportunities for learning and development departments and independent training companies with digital learning and blended learning. So it's all about the learning.
Indeed.
We're doing it online and at hybrid events now, rather than in the same physical space most often. How do you get people to even turn up when everybody is so bored of sitting in front of a computer screen?
So I don't have open workshops, so I'm not promoting them widely, but I need to promote them internally for exactly the reason you said, that people find a reason not to be in the room at the last minute, don't they? I'm a big fan of pre-learning, of e-learning that requires people to engage with the learning before they ever turn up. So we've already created some curiosity, we've already created some learning that they want to know what to do with. And I tell you that the trick that's worked best for me over and over again is actually including some sort of assessment. The first time that happened, I did a resilience assessment, and you got a score in 5 categories of resilience, and it was just a sort of warmer-upper, really. I didn't take it very seriously. When they arrived at the training, they wanted to know what their scores meant, and I was sort of skipping over that. I wasn't taking it seriously, but they did. And since then, I've noticed that every time I've done some sort of assessment, whether it's a personality profile or whatever it is, that's what draws people to the room, partly because what does it mean? Who am I? Well, tell me about me then. And it seems to work very well, actually. So that's one of the key ways, I think.
Oh, that's a really great way. I love that word about creating curiosity that you said. And because people only like to know what's in it for them, if you've given them an assessment and not the interpretation, they really do want to know, well, what box have they been put in and what does that mean in their day job?
They really seem to. I think video is a really good promoter as well, because they feel like they've met you and have got a sense of your pace, and as long as you video well, of course.
You work a lot with senior leaders, and some of the activities and the silliness that I endorse with my groups, who tend to be younger people and they're typically quite up for getting involved and engaged. How do you engage leaders online, people that think they've got to be corporate and professional and maybe a bit more serious?
So there are a few things that are important to me here. The first is value. You don't need to demonstrate value to more junior people in the way you do with more senior people, because they design their own days and it's up to them what they go to or include in their diary or not. Some of the junior people attend because they've been told to attend, that sort of thing. Senior people will attend if they think it's going to create value for them. They usually feel quite important, often are quite important, and their time is very tight. And so I make a big thing of including why this is worthwhile investment of their time. So value is right up there in front of everything. However, I have to say, I keep having to remind myself that these are just people. And the silliness that you do with the more junior people, these are still people. They haven't left their sense of humor behind when they got the promotion. And so finding ways of giving them fun in it all is still really important. I know sometimes people seem to be taking themselves seriously, but I find if I look past that and treat them as someone who enjoys going to a pub for a drink or watching Strictly on Saturday, or forget their corporate clothes and treat them as people, it works actually, and they want to have fun just like everyone else. So value and fun, I guess.
Yes, I would stress that what I describe as silly and fun always has a point. I never do activities that don't add to the learning outcome.
No, I hate those.
We've both been participants in meetings as well as running our own. When have you seen it go horribly wrong?
You warned me you were going to ask me that question. And I sat there thinking, well, I've been to loads of things that I've hated. Where has it actually gone horribly wrong? There are two camps very clearly for me. The first is what we were already discussing, and that's feeling patronised by it. Where I was put in a breakout room once to discuss my favourite flavour of crisp. And to make it meaningful, we had to justify why it was that rather than one of the others. Such a pointless thing when we could be talking about something useful while settling in with each other. So if I'm feeling patronised or asking such simple questions, you know, it's like asking what's 2 and 2, and no one answers because it's obvious what the answer is, and the whole thing is a disaster. So if we're going to do something involving, it has to have edge. And so where it's gone wrong for me is where I've just felt patted on the head and said, isn't this a nice thing to do? So that's one place it's gone wrong. The other place it goes wrong for me is technical issues. And I have huge sympathy for people with technical issues. And I know some can't be predicted. But these days, if we're having technical issues, we haven't done the legwork to make sure we're sorted. So if my Wi-Fi died now, it's completely out of my control. A month ago, my entire town lost Wi-Fi. Well, I've got it set up so I can go through my phone. If my computer broke, I've got a backup computer. I attended a session with Microsoft where a guy had come from America and was in the Microsoft headquarters in London, and he couldn't log into their Wi-Fi in the Microsoft office in London. And they were demonstrating how brilliant their AI is, and he couldn't demonstrate it. And I just thought, no, you know, why would I listen to anything you have to say? So that's really harsh to say because I've had terrible tech issues, but now I'm sorted. I've got backups of my backups.
And if we are professional presenters, then having backups to the backups really is the only way to go.
So that sounds really hard and arrogant and so on, but everyone is so short of time. Let's make sure we can be sharp.
And we absolutely don't want to be wasting anybody's time, do we?
No.
And that's not what we're paid for.
Indeed.
On the subject of tech, and we did drift into the topic a little bit earlier on, how do you think recorded video fits into the mix as well as live delivery? Because that can be a good backup, can't it? If you've got your whole session and sent it to the organizer, if everything fails in your town, they can always hit play and just run through your pre-recording.
So I believe that for learning to happen, it engages the emotions. Nick Shackleton-Jones's book, How People Learn, really good book. He talks about affective significance, why he chose difficult words, I'm not sure, but it basically saying the emotion you're feeling actually is the learning happening. And so if people aren't emotionally engaged with it, I don't think we're going to create any behavior change for a start. So video is very passive. And there are good things about that, but it's unlikely to create the emotional engagement that I'm looking for, and so needs to be used very carefully. So because it's passive, it's brilliant if you want a state change. You know, if emotion's so important, if people are tired, they've worked too hard, the eye contact of Zoom is worn them out, especially for the introverts and so on, then putting on a bit of video where they can just relax and nothing's demanded of them provides that reflection time and state change moment. I use it to provide some levity, but I use it very cautiously. Certainly live, I use it very cautiously, and I'm not convinced that the recordings create the change. They can create knowledge transfer, but I'm not sure the behavior change because of the lack of emotional buy-in. And I might be wrong.
Yeah, it's a good point. One of the things I've been doing since the first lockdown is a mentoring service for copywriters. That's my day job, is writing copy and training people how to write copy. And the people who attend live definitely get more value than the people who watch the recordings afterwards and miss the live sessions. But it's been an extra product I can sell. So from a business model point of view, it works.
Last week, I was running part of, or co-facilitating a mini MBA session for some senior execs. The flow model by Csikszentmihalyi landed really well. And so I created a video yesterday to send to all the participants, so they've got something both to remind them of the content, but also that they can use with their teams. And it was actually structured so they understand how they can teach their teams the implications of this flow model. And I thought, what a brilliant medium to be able to give it to them. They tackle it in their own time, their own way. But again, 2 minutes, it was maybe 3 minutes long.
That's not the same as making them sit and watch a 90-minute movie. It's just a bite-sized bit of content, isn't it, in a digestible medium?
Yeah.
Let's talk then about lasting behaviour change, which is really what proper training and learning is about. What audience participation activities do you use online most often that you find work to get that impact that you're really being paid for?
So I'm going to challenge the question, actually. This is going to, I'm sorry to pick you up. It's going to sound like I'm being really picky and fussy, but I just wonder if something really important is contained in that question in terms of principle, at least for me. And that's, I never do audience participation because I never have an audience. I would never, ever think of people in a training environment, whether face-to-face or online, or if I'm speaking to 500 people in a room, they're never an audience. They are always participants. And so I start from there. They don't get joining instructions. They're not delegates because they're participants in the learning. And so I just want to challenge that. Let's not do audience participation. Let's see how to help our participants participate.
That's a lovely definition, actually. I looked at the origin of the word audience, and it comes from audio, as in listen. So an audience is a passive thing that sits back and hears information. As you say, a participant takes part. And I think that is a distinction between what I think of as speaking and what I think of as training, in that speaking is some expert on a stage imparting their wisdom, and the audience, like a theatre audience, passively sits and applauds at the end. Whereas trainers or facilitators or some kinds of presenters are more about getting the information into the brain of the receiver, the participant, but it's what the participant does with that knowledge, information in their own brain that's going to make the real difference.
So I don't do audience participation. However, how do I get people to participate in ways that I think creates change? For me, it comes back to the emotion of it. So I'm looking to create what I call crucible moments, moments where they are out of their depth. I really want them to feel safe, but I never want them to feel comfortable. Comfort in a training environment, I think, is unhelpful. Safety, vital. So it's that strange balance of nervous excitement without tipping over into fear, or fear of being shamed, or fear of getting it wrong. You know, it's that feeling of standing at the end of a high diving board, that sort of excitement. And so I do spend quite a bit of my design time thinking about what emotional state am I looking to create here. You picked me up on curiosity earlier. Hugely important. How do I provoke curiosity so they are learning it for themselves rather than I'm telling them? And so the participatory moments have to require something of a sense of thrill, danger, excitement. To teach a model, put them in breakout rooms and say, discuss the model, I think is unhelpful. To get them to talk about how they could apply the model is better, but I still wouldn't do that. I'd get them to apply the model there and then on each other. So, you know, whether it's a coaching conversation, but something that they feel, I'm out of my depth here, I don't know how to, you know, I'm going to sink or swim. Oh, look, I can swim. So I'm looking for those participatory moments, and you can design them in breakout rooms and that sort of thing. I also love simulations. So I've got a business partner who's created this wonderful, brilliant finance simulation for corporate finance, to understand corporate finance. And so I created a digital version so we can play it on through Zoom. And there people are making decisions and then having to live with the consequences of their decisions as other people are playing against them. There is a degree of competition in it all. And there's a lot of learning that happens because of the emotional buy-in to, oh no, I've made a mistake there. I should have done this and I did that. And so there's a survival simulation that we've got. We're just finishing a marketing simulation where, based on the results of your marketing decisions, your brand decisions, all that sort of thing, you win or lose the limited pot of work that there is available. And so that sort of thing, I think, creates a different type of learning because you've engaged with it differently. I want to do more than talk about it.
And you use the word play there, which is one of my favourites. And you call it a simulation, but in a way it's a game. And
it is, yeah. I ought to add, and to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I do have a hammer, and so everything does look like a nail to me. The behaviour change, the long-term behaviour change tool that I keep coming back to and almost feel it's the only one I really trust is the idea of safe experiments. What's the smallest thing you could do that will give you results that are measurable, that won't matter if it doesn't work out the way you want it to, but you can learn from anyway? And so do that, try it as an experiment, do it for a day, for a week, for a month, whatever it is. And that takes the learning from cognitive assent to actual useful behavior. And so that whole safe experiment, I'm a huge fan of.
And we're in a culture now where failing fast is actually a goal.
Yeah, that's become okay, encouraged.
It's not long since I've been at an improv retreat where mistakes are actively celebrated, and it's such a great mindset to be in because there's no such thing as getting it wrong. It's whatever you do can be accepted and built on and rejoiced in. Earlier on, you talked about design of a digital learning experience. And I know, because I've checked you out, you've got 10 questions you typically ask for e-learning. And so maybe we can quickly just whiz through them. If I give you the 10 headlines and you can add a little bit of meat on the bones.
Thank you for looking me up. That's nice.
Well, it's all research. It's what good copywriters do. So the first one is, are we trying to influence their level of knowledge or their behaviour?
So these questions are all about designing e-learning as opposed to designing training. There is overlap, of course. So most of the e-learning out there at the moment, I have to say, most of it I really despair about. It's throwing information at people thinking that that's teaching, training, or whatever. And the only interaction we have is to test them to see whether they were listening. I understand it, that has value for compliance purposes, but I don't think learning is happening particularly. So the question is, am I just wanting to tell people stuff, or am I wanting them to change their behavior? I'm only interested in that one these days. So I don't really do that unless the client absolutely insists. And even then I challenge their thinking.
Okay, question 2, what's the gap?
So often we leap into our solutions without understanding the problems. So asking the extra questions, keeping on asking. I'm poor at it. I'm a knowledge expert. I know my stuff. Oh yeah, I know how to solve that. And I haven't actually asked the question. I have a wonderful activity where I bring a client in, and this client is throwing issues at the business I'm working with. And people are jumping in to solve these issues without ever understanding their issues, even though we've talked about the importance of asking the second question, asking the third or fifth question. They still want to solve rather than understand.
Question 3, where's the choice?
Oh, e-learning tends to be A to B. So you do section 1, you finish section 1, maybe answer a quiz, and then you do section 2. And I think, remove that. It's easy. Let them do section 5 first if they want to. If that's where their interest lies, let them plan their own learning journey.
Question 4, smart or stupid?
this is me reacting to the whole patronizing thing. It's my issue. But am I treating people as clever, resourceful, intelligent people, or am I wanting to step through it bit by bit? I hate films that explain it all to you, just in case. Oh, hello, my brother. Just in case I hadn't spotted that this was his brother. You know, so treat people as smart.
Number 5, where's the challenge?
If they're going to learn something, it needs to include a challenge. So how are they being challenged by this rather than just hearing what we have to say?
It's a good point, isn't it? Because our audiences or trainees or delegates or whatever we're going to call the people, our participants, they all know something already. And they already know their own job better than any of us do who are wheeled in to tell them something. So we've got to take their starting point and build on it rather than our own. Right, your question 6, showing or telling?
When we come to e-learning, so much is telling. That's what makes it so poor. So let's make scenarios, let's create an environment where they can see it happening rather than be told about it.
You've said here examples are more powerful than facts.
Indeed.
And there's a lesson there in the copywriting world from novelists that they wouldn't write, he was angry. They'd write, he stormed into the room shouting and smashed all the ornaments off the mantelpiece. And that show don't tell. You know he's angry by the way that story is written. It may take a few more words, but it gets that emotion across in more ways than one.
Really does, yeah.
All right, question 7, can we offer a fast track?
I was asked to do some security compliance stuff for a big global company. And people have been doing this for years. They know this stuff. So if they already know it, let's let them jump through to the bits they don't know. So regularly offering this choice of, if you're not sure what this means, then here we are. If you've already know this stuff, then jump to here. And sometimes that's the one time I might do a little assessment, and it's an assessment for you to know whether you know it or not. It's not for me to test you to check you know it.
Number 8, what psychological levers are relevant?
So I'm a great fan of Robert Cialdini's 7 principles. I've only just recently caught up that there is a 7th now. And so there's some examples of psychological levers where using some of the persuasive elements, some of the neuroscience behind it, if I can weave those in so that it makes more sense, it feels more as though I've got into their head and understand it from their point of view, rather than telling them from my point of view.
2 more questions then. Number 9, how is the learning socialized and applied?
To be applied in a way that changes the practice long term and actually changes the business, it needs to be socialized as well. So the question is not just what are you learning, but how are you sharing what you're learning? How are you learning from what the others are learning? So, you know, in a training event, you'd say at the end, so what are you going to do with what you just learned? And they all say that stuff, that's all great. But the second question is, how are you going to share the results of what you do so that everyone else can learn from what you've just done? And I don't find that easy to, it's easy in theory, but in practice, it's harder to make happen. But so I talked about safe experiments. They need to be socialized so that if I've tried something, someone else goes, oh, okay, I'll give that a try. So that's what I meant there. Socialization is partly increasing the wisdom because everyone's trying different things and we're learning from each other, but it's also building accountability, of course.
Right, your final question, designing e-learning, how are we going to measure the impact?
These people who say that measuring ROI is hard, I get, and I used to think that until I started doing it, I found it much more straightforward. There's so many things that we can measure these days, and there's so much data available these days. And so again, I don't want to sound arrogant here. I'm hard on myself now. If I think, oh, it's not easy to measure impact, measure ROI, that's me being lazy. There are ways, and it's not that hard. I just need to commit to it early on.
And it goes back to your question too, identifying the gap, because if you know what you're trying to achieve, and then you can put targets and measures in place to see, have you achieved it or not?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What else, if anything, do you think people ought to know about designing an effective e-learning experience?
I think it's very akin to training. We can see ourselves as the experts with lots to say, and therefore who we are and what we have to say becomes the focus. And if we can get our heads around making the participants, the learners, the focus, different things come out, and it becomes a different experience. So e-learning isn't hard to create anymore. The tools are very straightforward to use, but engaging e-learning only happens when you really work at not hosing people with information, but doing the hard work of working out how are they going to make this their own? How am I making it emotional? You know, how do you do that? And that's more challenging, and that's where I spend my time thinking, hang on a sec, I can tell them this, how do I tell them in a way that's going to change their lives? And that's where I have to work. And I love it, actually. And I'm a real believer in blended learning, the learning the models and that sort of thing beforehand, follow up after. And there is a place for face-to-face, whether it's through Zoom or not, interaction as well.
Thank you for all of those brilliant ideas. And where can people go to find out more about you?
Easiest is Leadability, that's an A in the middle, rather than ER, leadability.co.uk. And you can contact me there or see some of my e-learning is actually there and available.
It's a great conversation. Thank you.
Jackie, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.